Let me come to the concept of grand strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, let me now interrogate the concept of grand strategy. Since conceptually, grand strategy is all-encompassing, my focus will be on the grand strategy for foreign relations, which is not only restricted to military or defense strategy, but includes a wide range of international activities that are aimed at advancing Kenya's strategic interests in the global arena. The aim is to highlight certain issues that will inform your academic debate later. In an ever-evolving global arena, a grand strategy enables the country to develop anticipatory policies that will empower it to navigate the dynamic landscape of the 21st century international relations. Historically, grand strategy was more concerned with military sources of power to pursue and secure national interests. However, today, non-military sources of power have increasingly become essential. These include diplomacy, economy, and technology. Thus, in this contemporary world, a grand strategy is not only for war times, but also during peace and development. Notably, militarization in foreign policy seems to be yielding ground to geoeconomics, even as some actors continue to use force as a means of global influence. Geoeconomics is largely being embraced where states focus on the use of economic tools such as trade policies, foreign investment, global financial systems, economic sanctions, foreign aid, and grants to promote and defend their national interests and achieve imperative geopolitical objectives. The grandness of the strategy is based on the fact that the policy goals and interests are long-term rather than immediate or short-term. In sum, our collective policy strategies constitute a grand strategy. Our grand strategy employs economic, diplomatic, defense, technological, and other means to achieve foreign policy objectives. We as policy practitioners and government seek to manage and maximize all state resources, which, by the way, are very limited, in achieving Kenya's national interests. And an efficient way of doing this is through a grand strategy. I have just noted that the term grand strategy is absent or not frequently used in media and public policy discourses. Apparently, it remains confined to academic debates, as we are doing now. Therefore, today's topic is timely. It speaks to the need to ignite public discussions on grand strategy beyond academia. We need to be strategic in our foreign policy projection in this rapidly changing world that is said to be volatile, uncertain, and ambiguous. Similarly, Kenya notes the geostrategic constraints that landlocked countries face are increasingly becoming major drivers of conflicts on the continent. Brothers and sisters, there are 16 landlocked countries in Africa with a combined estimated population of 378 million people. They rely on their brothers and sisters who have a coastline. So basically, 400 million people are landlocked. Kenya advocates for the establishment of a contact group or working group to discuss, negotiate, and assess the concerns of the often forgotten landlocked countries and sticking contentious issues or conflicts related to maritime access. For instance, what is the plight of landlocked countries in Africa, given the complex global crisis impacting on our continent and the East Africa region? For example, the Red Sea waterway crisis. Many East African states have been affected economically and security-wise. However, when the cost of shipping, freight insurance, and goods goes up due to the Red Sea crisis, the impact is possibly double for the landlocked states that rely on the coastal countries. Kenya has a remarkable record of contributing to the maintenance of peace, international peace and security. Kenya remains committed to seeking peace and security in Somalia, Sudan, and the DRC, amongst others. Unfortunately, the crises in these states seem to be sliding into globally forgotten conflicts as international actors shift their attention to other supposedly pressing wars in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. In the hour of need, Kenya has always stepped forward as the brother's keeper. Presently, Kenya's peace diplomacy is fine-tuned and more purposeful. Our country has developed strategies to reap the dividends of its peace diplomacy. Kenya is fully committed to the principle of peaceful coexistence and non-interference and respect for sovereignty. We believe that it is in this way that we can enjoy positive reciprocity and our sovereignty being respected too. Kenya views the international system as not structured in a binary of West or East. As a state, we endeavor to be at peace with other states and seek to establish mutually beneficial ties with as many states as possible in the world. The zero-sum Cold War approach has to be replaced with cooperation, mutual respect, and collective security. Likewise, global issues of consequence such as climate change, global health diplomacy, conflicts, and socioeconomic challenges cannot be addressed by one state, nor by linear, rigid alliances based on the south-north or east-west poles. Greater collective action and coordination in global governance are now needed more than ever. The United Nations remains the main platform for global governance. Thus, Kenya continues to promote adherence to the UN Charter as the best way of responding to global questions of our time. Moreover, collective security, international rules, and global trade and financial norms must be pursued within a framework of multilateralism and mutual non-aggression. The 19th Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Non-Aligned Movement was held early this year in Uganda. With a membership of 120 plus countries, the movement stands as the largest group of countries after the United Nations. Kenya endorses the movement's agenda of increasing cooperation among developing states to influence global affairs. In this regard, Kenya continues to strategically pursue positive non-alignment. To quote a former British Prime Minister, who was also once the Foreign Secretary, Lord Palmerston, he said this: "We have no eternal allies. We have no perpetual enemies. Our interests are eternal and perpetual, and those interests are our duty to pursue." We support the view that global governance should operate within a reformed multilateral framework. For instance, Kenya advocates for a multilateral trade and financial system that is founded on equity, inclusion, and fairness. Once that promotes prosperity for all, and does not prioritize the dominance of one or a few. Ladies and gentlemen, the essence of contemporary diplomatic relations is mutual benefit. Regional integration provides a huge opportunity for win-win diplomatic outcomes. Kenya will continue to strengthen its position in the development and leadership of integration in the East Africa region by leveraging its geostrategic location, skilled human resources, and advanced economy in the region. The gradual and pragmatic expansion of the East African community is good for our region's economic prosperity, peace, and security. The entry of Somalia is the beginning of the expansion of the regional bloc towards the Horn of Africa. This hornwards expansion of the East African community is welcome, as it will not only solidify efforts towards peace and security in the entire Eastern Africa, but it will also open tremendous economic opportunities for our people in the region. The friendly and cooperative ties with our neighborly states within the East African community are the #1 reference point of our foreign policy. As a region, we have become increasingly interdependent. Hence, trade tensions and absolute detachment are no longer justifiable within our East African community. The future of our region and continent depends on deepening integration and not deepening divisions. Kenya, as a core state in the region and Africa, is committed to the promotion of intra-Africa trade under the collective aspirations of the African Continental Free Trade Area and the African Union's agenda of visa liberalization to foster Africa's integration. The President of Kenya, not too long ago, made the pronouncement of Kenya being a visa-free country. Kenya engages in transnational infrastructural connectivity to enhance intra-Africa trade and people-to-people relations. Kenya continues to steer its economic diplomacy for the development of our country and prosperity of its people. Kenya aims to be a competitive, export-led economy and responsive job creation for our people. We will focus on fostering sustainable development and economic growth through diversification, innovation, strategic partnerships. These include strategic economic partnerships agreement with the EU, strategic trade and investment partnership with the USA, comprehensive economic bilateral agreements with Japan, China, the United Arab Emirates, to mention a few. In our grand plan going forward, these strategic agreements will be unbundled and frequently explained to our citizens. Globally, developing states have become assertive, and this is no exception with our republic. Like all state actors in the international system, we should operate by the real politic maxim that our nation is a unitary and rational actor in international relations. It faces the outside world as a monolithic actor representing the proud citizens of Kenya. This indeed is what defines our patriotism. Remember that foreign policy is a function of domestic policy. Our internal unity of purpose and love of our country will positively project Kenya's position and image in the global arena. This is what attracts foreign investment, opens lucrative opportunities for our people, and enhances partnerships that transform the lives of Kenyans from the bottom up. Thus, in our grand plan, we want to close the missing link between the country's foreign policy and the citizens' understanding and engagement in our international affairs. This is to be achieved through direct public participation or advanced parliamentary engagements on foreign policy. Parliamentary democracy has become important in global affairs. For years, successful administrations have been shying away from engaging and sharing their foreign policy with Parliament. It is my intention to break away from this in our grand foreign policy plan. Parliament is a key player. Indeed, our global image as a leading democracy in the region cannot be gainsaid. Strengthening parliamentary democracy, deepening the rule of law, and empowering institutions to fight corruption informs our grand strategy. Kenya has an impeccable history of on-schedule democratic transfer of power. This is a very strong message. Very strong. No matter the criticisms we have, no matter what happens, from the day we got independence, it's now over 60 years, Kenya has always held their general election. You may criticize the process. You may criticize the outcome. You may petition in court. You may demonstrate through maandamano. But the reality is that Kenya has always held its elections. And Kenya has also been the first state in the region where a presidential election has been nullified by the Supreme Court, and we did not degenerate into chaos, but respected the rule of law and went back to the people to make their final decision. Don't ever underestimate that aspect about Kenya. This, ladies and gentlemen, will be backed by a reformed and effective foreign service, a robust diaspora engagement, a skilled and innovative workforce for domestic and global service, and a dynamic, patriotic citizenry. The desired results in foreign policy will be achieved through the teamwork of government ministries and agencies that include and not limited to trade, agriculture, treasury, labor, among others. After all, ours is a foreign policy of the Republic of Kenya, and not a single ministry or organ of the government. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now narrow down to Kenya's grand strategy in this evolving world system. From this end, I can confirm that Kenya's foreign policy outlook is replete with opportunities and risks that are being shaped by global critical geopolitics. So our grand strategy is a necessity for the survival of our state, as well as the pursuit of global opportunities for the prosperity, peace, and security of our nation. The framework of approach to this discussion is that states must look after their self-interests in an international system of competition for power and all that contributes to the attainment of national interests. Therefore, states must design and implement grand strategies for their survival. To begin with, I may summarize our foreign policy philosophy as that of being global in scope, but Pan-African in nature. We adhere to a globally relevant Pan-Africanism for mutually beneficial relations, where Kenya plays a leading role in an Africa that is willing and equipped to negotiate for its rightful space in the international arena. Kenya champions and remains committed to the interests of Africa in international relations. This is why Kenya's position is that as much as we highlight the global crisis, such as Gaza and Ukraine-Russia conflicts, we should not forget the ongoing crisis and intractable conflicts in our continent, which continue to kill our people and impoverish the continent. We must confront the uncomfortable truth that Africa's conflicts and crises are too often quickly relegated to the sidelines of international discourse as soon as supposedly priority conflicts emerge in other parts of the world. This crisis of humanitarianism is with us today. In short, you find a Kenyan, an African, whether from the south, from the east, from the north, or from the west, talking to you more about Gaza and Ukraine and telling you nothing about Sudan and South Sudan and DRC. They'll tell you more about those other conflicts and not tell you anything about our own conflicts. But now, let me just put this into perspective so that we can understand the crisis in Africa. The evolving global peace and security challenges have compounded the challenges of our time. As of 2023, over 37 million people had been forcibly displaced in Africa. That is just last year. 37 million people displaced, either within their own countries or beyond the borders of their own countries. In the period between 2019 and 2024, the UNHCR reports that conflict fatalities from selected African countries reached 208,000. Further conflicts continue to be major drivers of the food crisis in Africa. It is estimated that 121 million Africans are facing severe acute food insecurity, and 82% of this number are in the conflict-affected countries. That means Africa's conflicts, in reality, has caused more harm to humanity than all those other conflicts that we spend more time talking about. Further, the crisis on the continent have led to the damage and closure of thousands of schools, translating into an estimated 98 million children in Africa being out of school. 98 million children, the majority of them in conflict-affected areas. What will we call that generation? What will we call them? How will we treat them? We have seen that countries that, even in the neighborhood, when they had instability, they have taken well over 30 years to come out of a crisis. So what happens to Africa when 98 million children are out of school? Therefore, although acknowledging the interconnectedness of conflicts and crises globally and regionally, Kenya stands for global solidarity, equity, fairness, and collective security, where crises receive equal attention. Kenya supports the view that security threats in one part of the world should be treated as a threat to the entire world, and all actors should collectively address it. So, in the shadow of the global conflicts, let us not forget the silent suffering of our own people in Africa. At the same time, it is always a pleasure to be able to come to talk to talented people, students, on matters that are of very, very important concern to all of us. We all live in a world that there are too many moving parts. And once in a while, you may not know which part will actually have serious implications at your doorstep. So here we are to be able to talk. I'll give a fairly comprehensive statement, and I thought it's important to do so because I took the invitation very seriously, extremely seriously, and I thought that it would be a very good moment for us to share what we think, to get a feedback, to provoke thought, and through your contributions, we can also be sharpened and be able to make Kenya better in terms of its status as a leading nation and emerging nation as we go forward. Kenya continues to leverage its soft diplomacy tools, such as cultural exchanges, training, capacity building, peace interventions, sports, and art. Our sports people, especially athletes, continue to raise our flag and image globally. Kenya will also promote sports tourism by hosting and supporting international sporting events. In our grand strategy, we shall support creative arts by marketing Kenya as a film production destination and supporting the internationalization of local film production and content. This will go a long way to develop the creative economy and further support Kenya's projection of its soft power diplomacy. The establishment of a pool of veterans for mediation and special envoys on peace, technology, and the blue economy, for instance, is part of the grand schemes in projecting Kenya's image to attract investment, promote tourism, and strengthen diplomatic ties. What do I talk of pool of veterans? I mean no ill will. I was told that Professor Macharia often goes to the gym. But there's a reservoir of diplomats, of people who are schooled in this area. Some have served in public space, some have served in academia. We wish to state here that we want to draw on this pool of veterans for aspects of mediation and special challenges that we face as we look at our foreign and diplomacy going forward. Diaspora engagement has been invigorated to contribute to Kenya's national development agenda. The government of Kenya has designated a fully fledged State Department for Diaspora Affairs under a principal secretary. As one of the pillars of our foreign policy, diaspora diplomacy aims to harness the diverse skills, knowledge, expertise, and resources of Kenyans abroad and facilitate their integration into the national development agenda. The diaspora are our cultural and economic ambassadors. Now, this is very interesting to you. The Central Bank of Kenya revealed that remittances by Kenyans abroad in the 12 months to November 2023 was at $4.19 billion, up from $4.028 billion in the same period in 2022. Clearly, the remittances have surpassed our earnings from tea, from tourism, from coffee, and from horticulture. The diaspora. If they coughed, our shilling will be in trouble. That is now the reality. So, for Kenya, one of our intentions is to continue to engage global partners to diversify and increase international employment opportunities for our citizens. Kenya has centralized technology, diplomacy to position itself as a regional frontrunner in the digital diplomacy sphere. Tech diplomacy facilities, diplomatic outreach and networking, enhances global visibility and cultural exchanges. Tech diplomacy offers a novel way to negotiate, cooperate, and address pressing global challenges of our time, such as climate change, industrialization, digital divide, cybersecurity, misinformation and disinformation, and rapidly advancing information space. The appointment of the Special Envoy for Technology attests to the significance that Kenya attaches to this tech diplomacy. I can also tell you that the gentleman I refer to here is also a young man. We are grateful that our foreign policies are actively executed by our President, His Excellency President William Ruto, who plays the role of Kenya's chief diplomat. He has also cut an international niche in the matters of climate change. For instance, the Africa Climate Summit, hosted by Kenya, reignited action and discussions on carbon markets, climate financing, and unlocking Africa's green energy potential. Kenya continues to pitch on summit diplomacy, which has seen the President lead our foreign policy from the front, directly engaging other heads of state and government. Summit diplomacy ni hile ya juju. The emerging trend today is the continuous use of high-level visits, including state visits, by state leaders to derive their foreign policy agendas. This is why, like other strategic world leaders, the President and the Prime Cabinet Secretary have invigorated our foreign engagements through trips abroad to various strategic partners. Finally, Kenya's foreign policy runs on vigorous diplomacy and not aggressive confrontation. One that is more decisive, with more pointed national interests, and not transactional. Quiet diplomacy, rather than trumpet diplomacy, remains the foremost instrument of foreign policy in Kenya's harmonious relations with other states. This will, of course, be guided by research-based decision-making, and this is where you really come in as an institution and as academia. In this regard, the Foreign Service Academy will be a key resource. Through the academy, the ministry will also engage relevant government and non-governmental research institutions like USIU, civil society, and think tanks.